In a peaceful village of Umwese, nestled between thick forests and rolling hills, lived a young maiden named Nkem. Her beauty was the kind whispered about in faraway markets and sung in palm wine bars. Her skin glowed like polished bronze, her eyes sparkled like the morning dew, and her smile was said to soften even the hardest of heart. Elders called her the jewel of Umweze, and young men lined up like bees to honey, hoping to win her heart. But Nkem was not only beautiful, she was also proud. Her walk was regal, her voice commanding, and her standards impossibly high. She turned down every suitor, no matter how wealthy or handsome. A girl like me doesn't settle, she often boasted, fanning herself under the mango tree as hopefuls walked away heartbroken. Among the many who admired her from afar was Obinna, the quiet blacksmith's son. He had no title, no riches, just skillful hands and a heart full of dreams. But Nkem never spared him a glance. She didn't even know his name. Little did she know, fate has started turning its wheels, and beauty, as they say in Umweze, is only the beginning of the story, not the end. The entire village of Umweze buzzed with excitement. It was time for the Iriji festival, the annual New Yam celebration that brought dancers, drummers, and visitors from neighboring towns. The village square was swept clean. Palm fronds waved in the breeze, and women decorated the trees with bright fabrics. Nkem, as always, would lead the maidens' dance, adorned in coral beads and a wrapper that shimmered like starlight. That morning, her mother rubbed her skin with shea butter and painted white chalk designs across her hand. Your beauty is a blessing, Nkem, she said. Carry it with grace. Nkem smiled. She was pleased. She could already hear whispers that she would be crowned Adaumeze, the most beautiful maiden in the village. But far away, near the outskirts of Umwezi, a jealous spirit stirred. Her name was Idu, a vengeful entity banished from the land long ago for her vanity and cruelty. Her spirit has long wandered in bitterness, whispering to envious heart. And now she saw Nkem's glow, and it burned her. As night fell and torches were lit, the square erupted in music and movement. Nkem danced at the center, graceful as a gazelle. The drums roared, the crowd cheered. Then suddenly, boom! A fire erupted from the side of the stage. Screams filled the air as people scattered. A spark from a fallen torch had caught a pile of palm fronds. In the chaos, Nkem stumbled. Her wrapper caught fire. A young man dashed through the flames. It was Obinna. He pulled her out, covering her with his bare hands, but not before the fire kissed her cheeks. The crowd gasped. Nkem's perfect face was burned. The healer's hut was quiet, except for the soft clatter of cowries and the rustling of herbs. Nkem lay on a raffia mat, her face turned to the wall. Her mother sat beside her, weeping silently, while the village dibia ground bitter leaves into paste. The fire had left a deep scar stretching from Nkem's right cheek to the edge of her jaw. Her skin, once praised as smooth and flawless, was now raw, swollen, and painful. Nkem didn't cry. She hadn't spoken since the accident. When the dibia finished dressing her wound, he looked gravely at her mother. She will live, he said, but the scar will remain. The news spread fast. By morning, gossip danced through every compound like Harmattan wind. Nkem's beauty is gone. The Adaumweze is no more. Can a flower still bloom if the petals are torn? Even the mirror in Nkem's hut seems to mock her. She stood before it in secret, staring at the unfamiliar face. This is not me, she whispered. This cannot be me. In her rage, She lifted the mirror and smashed it on the floor. From behind the curtain, someone had been watching. Obinna. He stepped forward slowly, carrying a fresh bowl of palm oil ointment. You are still you, Nkem, he said gently. But even flowers must face storms. She turned her face away. Why did you save me? She spat, tears finally spilling. Obinna paused. Because you are worth saving. But Nkem didn't believe him. In her mind, everything she was had been taken in one cruel night. Her beauty was her power. Without it, who was she now? Weeks passed, but Nkem refused to leave the house. The once vibrant girl who commanded attention at every gathering now sat quietly by the window, covered in a scarf that hid half her face. Visitors came bearing gifts, yam, oil, fabric, but Nkem turned them all away. Even her closest friends stopped visiting. The village moved on. A new maiden named Isioma was crowned Adaumueze. The villagers cheered, but everyone still whispered about the girl who had once held that title. She must have offended the gods, some said, or perhaps it was a curse from an angry spirit. And in the forest where the fire had begun, the jealous spirit, Idu, smiled in the shadows, feeding off every cruel word. The more Nkem suffered, the stronger Idu became. Obinna continued to visit, always leaving food or ointment by the door. He never stayed long, but every time Nkem opened the door and saw his quiet offerings, a strange warmth filled her heart, a feeling she couldn't understand. One evening, her younger brother barged into her room. Why do you hide like a ghost? He asked boldly. You didn't die. You survived. But you act like you already buried. The words hit hard. That night, Nkem stared at her reflection in a basin of water. The scar was still there, dark, raised, and real. But behind it, her eyes were still her own. Then something strange happened. She heard a voice, not aloud, but deep in her spirit. If beauty is all you are, then it was never truly yours. Startled, she stepped back. Was it madness? Or was there something or someone trying to awake her? The next morning, Nkem rose before the sun. For the first time since the fire, she left her compound, not to be seen, but to seek answers. She wrapped her scarf tightly and walked towards the forest path that led to the Cave of Whispers, a sacred place spoken of in old tales. It was said that only those in deep pain or great need could hear the voice of the gods there. Her mother begged her not to go. It's dangerous, she cried. There are wild spirits, snakes, and worse. But Nkem was no longer afraid of scars or spirits. What she feared most was losing herself. The forest was thick and quiet. Birds scattered overhead, and the crunch of dry leaves echoed beneath her feet. Hours passed as she climbed hills and crossed streams, guided only by memory and instinct. At last, she reached the mouth of the cave, a dark opening covered in hanging vines. Inside, the air was cool and thick with silence. Nkem knelt and whispered, if there is any spirit here, if there is any God listening, show me who I am without beauty. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint glow appeared in the cave wall. It formed into the image of a woman covered in scars, her eyes glowing gold, her presence powerful. The spirit spoke without moving her lips. You were admired for your face, but now you must learn to be remembered for your heart. Nkem trembled. But how? Go back. The one who truly sees you has always been near. Open your eyes, not the one in your face, but the one in your soul. Then the image faded. Shaking, but strangely strengthened, Nkem left the cave with a fire in her chest. Not the one that burned her skin, but the one that began to heal her spirit. When Nkem returned to Umweze, her steps were lighter, but her heart was still heavy with questions. Her scarf remained in place, but her mind was clearer. She no longer walked like a ghost, and villagers turned to look, not in mockery, but in surprise. Something changed in her. She went straight to the blacksmith hut. Obinna was at work, sweat glistening on his brow as he struck hot iron against the anvil. He paused when he saw her. Nkem, he said, blinking. She nodded. I need to speak with you. He led her inside, offering her a stool. It was the first time Nkem had ever entered his home. It smelled of iron, charcoal, and wood smoke. Strong, earthy scents. She looked around at the handcrafted tools and ironworks neatly arranged, all shaped with care. You've been kind to me, she began softly, even when I never noticed you before. Even now, Obina looked into her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. I noticed you long before the fire came, he said, but now I see more of you than ever. Your spirit is awake. She felt tears threatening again, but she blinked them back. I want to do something with this pain, she whispered. I want to find purpose. Can you help me? Obinna nodded without hesitation. There's a widow in the next village who teaches young girls to sew. She was once scarred in war, but she became a healer of broken souls. I can take you there. Nkem took a deep breath. For the first time since the fire, she smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that charmed the crowd, but the kind that promised growth. Outside the hut, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light over the village. The journey to the next village, Obioma, took a full day's walk. Nkem and Obina traveled together, sharing roasted granules and stories under the rising sun. For the first time, Nkem laughed freely, not the proud, rehearsed laugh of old days, but the kind that sprang from when they arrived, they found a small compound near the edge of the village. Children were seated beneath a mango tree, their small fingers threading needles into fabric, their eyes fixed on a graceful woman with skin like old bark and deep tribal marks that danced across her cheek. This was Mama Odwak, the one Obinna had spoken of. She rose when she saw them. Her steps were slow, but her response and her presence was strong. Obinna bowed. Mama, this is Nkem of Umweze. She seeks healing, not just of the body, but of the spirit. Mama Odwak looked at Nkem, not at her scarf, not at her scar, but into her. After a long moment, she said, I see a storm has passed through you. Come, you have work to do. Nkem spent the next weeks learning how to sew, how to dye clothes, how to bead, and most importantly, how to teach. Mahmoudouak taught her that beauty could be found in stitches that held things together, in patterns that told stories, and in hands that served others. Nkem began training the younger girls. Her fingers bled at times, her eyes strained late into the night, but each time she looked into the mirror, she saw something new, not her scar, but her strength. And every weekend Obinna visited. He never spoke of love. He just brought news, kola nuts, and quiet smiles. But in their silence, something began to blow. Slowly but surely. Months had passed, and the dry season had begun to settle on the land. Nkem moved like a woman reborn, her voice steady, her hands skilled, her presence calming. She was no longer introduced as the girl who was once beautiful, but as the teacher of Obioma, the one who stitched broken girls into whole women. But her heart stirred with something deeper. She knew it was time. Time to return to Umueze. Time to face the place where her old self had burned away. Mama Udua packed her a bag of dyed fabrics, beads, and thread. Take this, she said, and take your story too. You carry more than a scar now. You carry power. Obina walked beside Nkem as they journeyed back. There was silence between them for most of the trip, until she suddenly stopped. Obina, she said, why didn't you ever tell me how you felt before the fire? He hesitated. Because I thought beauty like yours belonged to someone greater. I didn't know the flame would show me the part of you I was truly drawn to. She smiled and touched his hand. Then maybe the flame wasn't a curse after all. When they reached Umueze, the villagers stared. The same people who once whispered cruel things now watched in quiet awe. Nkem did not hide her face. Her scarf hung loosely across her shoulder. The scar was still there, but it no longer led her story. And somewhere in the shadows of the forest, the jealous spirit would let out a bitter scream. Her power had finally broken. Life in Umueze began to shift in quiet, meaningful ways. Nkem reopened her family's compound as a training hut for young girls. She taught them how to sew, bead, speak with confidence, and see what's beyond the mirror. Mothers brought their daughters from neighboring villages. Nkem had now become more than a face. She was now a legacy. One afternoon, as she taught a group how to design wrappers using natural dyes, she heard a familiar cough at the gate. Obina. He stood there holding a small wooden box. She wiped her hands and stepped out to meet him. You've come again with kola nuts and silence, she teased gently. He smiled. Not today. Today, I bring something else. He opened the box. Inside lay a bracelet made of iron and coral. Simple but radiant. I forged it myself, he said. Iron for strength, coral for beauty. You taught me both. Nkem blinked, unsure if this was truly happening. Obinna. Then he took a deep breath. I loved you when you were admired. I loved you when you were broken. And I love you now, not because of your face, but because you taught me what love really means. The compound was silent. Then slowly, Nkem reached into her wrapper and pulled out a single cowrie shell. She placed it in his hands. The last time I gave this to someone, I was 5 years old, and said it meant I lied then. I never gave another one. Obina stared at the shell, then at her, and asked, and what does it mean now? It means yes, she said, her voice steady. Yes to love that sees. Yes to love that stays. They stood there, not as a blacksmith and a scared girl, but as two hearts that had survived the fire and come out stronger. The sun rose gently over Umueze on the morning of the wedding. There were no trumpet blasts or royal dancers, just the rhythmic beats of drums, the smell of roasted yam, and the sweet hum of palm wine being poured. This was not a celebration of wealth or status. It was a celebration of something rare, transformation. Nkem stood before her mirror one last time. The scar on her cheek was still there, slightly faded but unmistakable. She traced it with her finger, not in sorrow, but in acceptance. She no longer flinched at her reflection. She no longer mourned what was lost. This face, her face, told a story of survival, of pride humbled, and purpose found. It was a face people now associate with courage, resilience, and strength. Outside, children ran with fabric flags stitched by her own hands. Young girls giggled as they passed, whispering, "That's Nkem, the woman who teaches us more than beauty." Obinna stood at the altar carved from Iroko wood, his iron bracelet polished and gleaming. When Nkem emerged, silence fell over the crowd, not out of shock, but reverence. She wore a wrapper dyed with deep earth tones, her natural hair wrapped in coral embellished scarf. She did not cover her scar. She did not kneel so. Mama Udwak sat near the front, proud and beaming. The old woman raised her walking stick and nodded once. Nkem caught the signal and smiled. When the vows were exchanged, Nkem's voice was calm but firm. "I do not come to you perfect," she said, looking into Obinna's eyes, "but I come to you whole." And with that, the drums began to beat again, not to honor outer beauty, but to mark the union of two souls who had seen beyond the surface. From that day, Nkem's scar was no longer a symbol of tragedy. It became a badge of becoming. And in every village market square, at every festival and gathering, people told the tale of the girl who lost her beauty and found something greater.